Good afternoon and welcome to Clash Course. My name is Joey Livingston and my co-host is Greg Brahe. I'm a theist. Greg is an atheist. Clash Course is about talking about important issues between people who disagree with one another, doing it civilly and ending as friends. And even though Greg and I hate each other, we'd like to set an example. Also, we invite you as watchers of the show to join in by sending comments and questions, but also drop us an email if you want to take one of our places. You can take the place of the atheist or take the place of the theist, and you can argue in the stead of Greg or in the stead of myself right here on this show. In some episode coming up soon, Benjamin Flores is going to be taking the place of Greg. Did you know that, Greg?
I know he said he wanted to. I didn't know if you guys had organized that yet, but I told him to send you a message.
He was all intimidating and stuff. He jumped on the message. He's like, I want to debate you now. But then the first thing that he suggested that we debate about was the ways in which church is harmful.
Well, that's not going to be an easy debate since we agree on everything.
It is. I don't know what else can theists and atheists argue about besides the existence of. Well, let me rephrase that. What else can a theist like me and an atheist like you or Benjamin argue about except the existence of God?
Oh, there's all kinds of things. We could argue about politics or personal taste.
Oh, okay. Things that have nothing to do with the difference between an atheist and a theist.
Right, exactly. There's still plenty of things that we can disagree on and absolutely vehemently hate each other for, even if we agree on most everything else. That's
very good.
That's
very good.
The way humans work, I believe.
Right.
That's actually going to be part of what I talk about on my next show, Inspiring Honesty, today. So,
stop the buzz marketing, please. Okay. All right. So, last time we did the show, we had to skip it last week for a couple different reasons. But the last week before last, we were beginning our first segment of Does God Exist, or is it reasonable to believe in God, as Greg would put it. And I talked pretty much the whole show. And so I'm going to continue that trend this week by beginning. And I'm going to read a couple of Wikipedia entries, because last week we kind of started going around and around on the difference between a deist and a theist and a pantheist. I claim that I'm a theist. Greg claims that that my argument is more pantheistic, and I think there's probably a lot of people out there who would agree with Greg. But at some point, and I was just kidding, Greg's going to talk most of the show, but at some point I'm going to argue to the contrary, that we are not thinking this through if we consider the argument that I made to be fully pantheistic. Though I agree there are some, it reeks of it. All right, so deism. And this is out of Wikipedia. I just pulled these sources up very quickly, and I like Wikipedia because it's always right. All right, deism.
I'm editing it right now, actually, to make sure that it's right the way I see it. Right. So
deism is what pantheism is what Joey Livingston believes. All right, deism is the belief that reason and observation of the natural world are sufficient to determine the existence of God, accompanied with the rejection of revelation and authority as a source of religious knowledge. I'm going to be very short and just read the first few sentences of each one. You're welcome to go to Wikipedia and look up these entries yourself, read them more thoroughly, and if you think there's something important that points out how I'm wrong, you can send that in to us. Theism, Greg, I thought that you might find at least what's said here to be interesting and perhaps unexpected. First line: theism, in the broadest sense, is the belief that at least one deity exists. Comments?
I guess you're waiting for commentary. It's true. I mean, I make a distinction. This would be one of those, Dr. Jones always says that words have usage and not meaning. And I make a distinction between theism and deism, as though deism is the broader spectrum and theism is the tighter spectrum. But I mean, etymologically, is that the right word?
Yeah. If Wikipedia represents the broadest, if Wikipedia represents the most accepted definitions, then deism would actually be a subcategory of theism.
That's true. I've always considered it to work a bit the opposite direction, only because of the scope. Deism, in my understanding of it at least, is sort of the most generic idea of a god possible. A creator, and that's basically it.
Sure.
Where then theism almost always, I mean, unless we're including deism as a subset of theism. The reason that I make the distinction in the opposite direction is saying that theism is a subset of deism, basically makes it so that theist is more of a pointed argument that what this God is like.
All right. Greg says Wikipedia is wrong. We all
no. I just say that
we all know how stupid a claim that is, Greg. Greg loses automatically. Let's see. Let me finish reading that. Theism, in the broadest sense, is the belief that at least one deity exists. In a more specific sense, theism is commonly a monotheistic doctrine concerning the nature of a deity and that deity's relationship to the universe. Theism, in this specific sense, conceives of God as personal, present, and active in the governments and organization of the world and the universe. I'm going to stop right there. That does get a little more specific, and I don't have too much of a problem with that definition, and I'm willing to argue it. Pantheism, and once I read this, I'm going to hand this over to you, Greg. Pantheism is the belief that everything composes an all-encompassing, immanent God, or that the universe or nature is identical with divinity. Pantheists thus do not believe in a personal or anthropomorphic God. All right, so my current beliefs, and I'm always changing. This is why I was rejected by the church. My current beliefs are, I would say, very much theistic. There is some sense of pantheism in it, but I reject the latter notion that God is not personal or anthropomorphic. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to turn this over to you and give you an opportunity to take as much time as you want during this show to make your arguments and to make me look silly. Oh, by the way, Sai's video, how to talk to the fool, how to answer the fool.
I think it's how to answer the fool. Yeah,
came out. We take up a full 30 minutes of that DVD.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, have you seen it?
I have. I've had an opportunity to watch that part. So.
What did you think? What did you think of my spot?
I was impressed, to be honest, with both you and Dr. Jones, because that was one where you didn't hold back quite so much. So I appreciated seeing the teeth come out a little bit.
I'm just, on the one hand, I respect those guys for releasing at least a mostly honest version of what happened backstage. And from their point of view, we look very foolish, but I really have no problem with the video itself. I was just, the fact that they wouldn't release it to us ahead of time made me fearful that they weren't going to represent us faithfully. But I think they did. They cut some stuff out, and I think it could have been, there could have been more left in there. But what was in there was, I think, accurate to what happened, and I don't really have any problem with it.
I have to say I was disappointed because my favorite part of
because
what
it didn't
I said
actually make me look like a fool.
Right? Yeah, there was that, but no, it's because my favorite part of what I said during that show, where I summed up exactly what Sai was about to say and criticized it with what I think to be an absolute and completely faultless criticism in about a minute of time, and they didn't show that part, so.
Well, we'll show it, Greg.
All right. Okay. I look forward to that.
That said, the fool is going to shut his mouth and allow the other fool to speak. Go ahead, fool.
This is how to answer between fools.
Yeah. How the fool answers the fool.
So I wanted to say that I do find the definition given of pantheism to be pretty accurate. And like I said, theism, deism, I've heard both usages of it. It does say, theism in its broadest sense is just the belief that one deity, or at least one deity, exists. And I can grant that. That's not the sense that I tend to use it in. I tend to go with the more specific sense. And generally, I look at deism as the other side, that at least a deity exists. It's, I guess, my fault for not adhering to the most common usages on those terms. But for the intents of the remainder of this discussion, we'll be using the terms as they appear here on Wikipedia. So I did want to to qualify a bit, though. Last week, when we defined what God is, can you repeat the way that you had worded that, Joey?
Really?
I know it was really similar to a creator.
It was also about 40 minutes
has a
long.
Will, right? Essentially.
Oh, okay. So I see. At the beginning, what the definition we agreed on?
Very beginning.
A conscious and willful creator.
That's it. A conscious and willful creator. And that, I think, is very specifically theism. By, again, Wikipedia's definition here, and in the specific sense that it grants, it is a monotheistic doctrine concerning the nature of a deity and that deity's relationship to the universe. God conceives of God as a personal present, and active in the governance and organization of the world and the universe. Now, that was the one qualification that you didn't grant me last time that I was really hoping for, was that last clause.
Let me tell you what I'll do. Let me tell you what I'll do with that. I will playfully allow that to enter the arena, and what I mean is just for fun. I'm not sure how well I could argue that, and I don't feel like I have to give you any more ground than I already have. But just for funsies, if you want to throw that in there from time to time, I will try to counter it.
Okay, well, I think what we can do then is establish that as an independent clause, perhaps, see what we can do on the rest, and then
Sure.
talk about that one so that it doesn't muddy up your entire argument.
I think that if we can, if I can show the existence of a conscious and willful creator, period, whether or not he plays an active role in this universe or not, I think the atheist position is very clear that none such thing exists in any form.
Well, I guess that depends exactly, though, on how you're defining it. Atheism and pantheism are identical aside from language in many ways. When it says that, again, with pantheism, that the universe or nature is identical with divinity, the way I see that is just the universe exists, nature exists, therefore.
So, are you claiming that pantheists do not think that this universe is conscious and willful?
It says that it is not pantheists thus do not believe in a personal or anthropomorphic God. Generally, panentheists believe that God is synonymous with the universe and more. A pantheist is somebody who basically can substitute the word universe and God, or the words universe and God.
Okay.
And the atheistic position is perfectly compatible with pantheism. There's plenty of people who describe themselves as spiritual atheists and will identify in that way. And that's a personal choice. I don't.
I love, you reminded me of Tosh's quote about religion and spirituality. Did you ever hear Daniel Tosh talk about that? He said, "I love it when people tell me that they're not religious, they're spiritual. I always respond, I'm not lying, but you're interesting." or I'm lying. I think he said, I'm lying, or you're interesting. Anyways, I just slaughtered it, but it was fun.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I've always been disappointed when people screw up other comedians' jokes, but hey, here we are. So, the argument that I intended to make coming into last week's show was more along the lines of the theistic God that does have a beyond willful, that the will extends to the world in which we live on an accessible level for humans. And I think that is a much easier thing to grasp, for one, and it's much more representative of how most theists believe. Now, I'll grant you, you are not most theists, Joey, but I think that you and I can agree that most theists do believe that God interacts with the world around them, has a will for the way that people should act, and a way that the world should go, and even often has a plan. Would you agree that that's true for most?
I do agree, but and although I'm willing to playfully entertain that in this argument, I will say that if you spend too much time concentrating on that you will not be defeating me, but you will be on my team defeating these other theists, because that is something that the reason why I'm allowing it playfully is because it's something that I am allowing playfully within my own mind. It's something that I'm rolling around and seeing, is this possible, and is it observable?
Excuse me for just one moment here.
Okay.
Sorry, that was my mom came to visit for a moment. She's picking up my son, taking him to dinner.
I wish that I'd remembered to talk to you before the show, because a crew member had this amazing idea that when your mom needed you to speak with her, that you should, instead of saying, "Hang on just a minute, my mom needs to speak with me," that you should get upset and storm off the stage.
That would have been awesome. I'm disappointed that I hadn't thought of that myself now, and that you didn't share it. Way to let us all down.
Yeah. Once again.
Okay, so you're right. I'm not going to focus too much on that today, but I did really want to make the point that is representative of most theism, and that is primarily the argument that I fight against as an atheist, because of all the implications that come along with that. Now, the more deistic or pantheistic side, even the panentheistic side of it, are less tangible and have a lot less interaction with daily life. But I still believe that they are unjustified beliefs, and that's the primary point of my argument today, is that regardless of whether or not these things are possible, the question here is, should we believe in these things? Now, that is, should would be a normative statement that applies to I guess in multiple realms, but this specific realm is saying, or this specific usage is saying, that it is compelling. There is a compelling amount of evidence out there that we should believe this to be true. There is a better chance that is true than that is not true. That's the way I see this usage to be, or this term should, playing out with this argument. So I apologize if that's not the way that you intended to use it, but I guess I should probably ask, do you?
So you're saying that neither of us are here to put some sort of mathematical proof on the board that that we believe to be irrefutable. We are simply here to say that the evidence that is before us, or rather than saying evidence, let's just say the observable things that we can talk about and both look at and agree on, that they should give us reason to either believe in a conscious and willful creator or to dismiss this notion. Is that
Correct.
what you're saying? Is
Yes.
that what you? Okay. Yeah,
Actually,
that's how I render the word
that a little
should.
bit,
That's
though.
how I render the word should, of course. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Should or
I do
should
want to
not?
qualify that a little bit with a touch of a reversal. Instead of either believing that or dismissing the notion, I personally believe, as a standard of scientific epistemology and philosophy, the default position should be the null. We should either believe that, or hold a tentative belief that the universe is all that there is and that no gods exist, or we should have good reason to dismiss that belief.
So you're suggesting that shelving it would be as good as dismissing it in this discussion. Shelving it.
I'm not sure what you mean by shelving it.
Okay. Well, we could say that we have good reason to dismiss this, or we could say there's no reason to believe it, but as an objective person who does not have compelling evidence that such a thing does not exist, we can just shelve that indefinitely. We can put it on the bookshelf. We can put it on a shelf somewhere where it can collect dust.
Certainly. The way I see it is there's 3 levels of belief, I guess. One is belief that something is true. One is belief that something is not true. And the other is belief that something is possible. And I think that it's perfectly valid to argue that a god of some sort, and only certain definitions of gods, are possible gods. But that doesn't mean that they are probable. And again, using that word should, I think that something needs to be more probable than not for us to make the leap of saying we should believe in that.
Okay.
So, the question then falls to why should we believe that there is any sort of God? And again, we're defining God to mean a creator, a conscious and willful creator.
Just remember the acronym CAWK.
I will do that.
No, CAWK. CAWK.
Okay.
You want me to say it again?
I was thinking CAUL, but that's because I work with that.
CAWK. Very simple. Conscious and willful creator. CAWK.
Conscious and willful creator. Okay. I really don't even know where to go with the argument that we should not believe in that, aside from saying that I simply have never been presented compelling evidence to say that that is the case. Now, I thought it was interesting, the approach that you took in saying that it's certainly plausible, given the structure of the universe, to say that the universe itself could, in fact, be conscious itself, and therefore potentially even willful.
Okay, let me make this easy for you. Okay, I'm going to suggest that it is. It is conscious. Okay, I'm just going to put that on the table, and you can go from there. All right. So you said that all you want to do in this discussion is prove that it's not probable. Okay. So doesn't it make it easier for me to put it on the table that it is, not to say it could be? Let me just say it
does.
Is. Okay. All right. It is.
I'm not going to lie. It does make it much easier for me to say that. Because then there's the other side of it is saying that just because, now I'm going to address your argument here directly, just because the universe is structured in much the same way a brain is, does not necessarily make it conscious, nor does it make it willful, without us having a way to do that. And I can present plenty of evidence to say that that's true, but I should ask before I do that, how do you define conscious? Does that mean self-aware or just aware? And awake, able to observe, whatever.
Well, which one would make it easier for you?
Well, the self-aware would certainly be easier, because I guess the best question to ask is an ant conscious?
Yes.
Okay, then I can certainly make this argument. Ants have brains.
The first definition, Dr. Jones hates when people pull out the dictionary, so I do it first thing. First definition of conscious in Webster's is aware of one's own existence.
Okay, so that would mean that an ant is not conscious, right?
Can we say that definitively?
Well, I guess we can't definitively, but we can certainly say that there are signs of self-awareness that have been tested. And we're pretty confident that dolphins are self-aware, that a lot of the great apes are self-aware, but the mark of a conscious mind is metacognition, the ability to think about thinking, to simply be in the moment and be aware of what is going on does not mean that you are aware that you yourself are in this moment, if that makes sense.
I struggle with that. I think that I have a hard time dismissing consciousness from life in a sense. I'm not saying that definitively, but I am saying that I don't think that any scientist can prove definitively that even a tree is not on some level, that it does not have a consciousness on some level.
It becomes increasingly difficult to debate something when the terms are so broad and loosely defined, though, because consciousness. If we're going to grant that,
but
a
I'm not
tree
trying to.
could
I'm not trying to
potentially
be
conscious.
I'm not trying to be difficult, but I do want to use caution in defining these things, because if we say that only human beings and dolphins and apes are conscious, that really raises the bar when it comes to consciousness. That's like, well, my dog is not conscious. So if I knock my dog out, if I hit it on the head and it goes to sleep for a while, it is not unconscious because it was never conscious.
That is a fair distinction. Now, can you say the same of a tree? I mean, would a tree going dormant for the winter count as being unconscious then?
Well, also a good point, but just because I use the example to distinguish with a dog, conscious versus unconsciousness, doesn't mean that there isn't another example for a tree. But I don't know that I can come up with a good example for that in real time. I will grant for the moment that a tree is not conscious, simply because I can't say anything compelling about that. But in real life, I wrestle with that, because we see a gradient of life from single cell organisms all the way up to the brain of a human being, and to starkly cut off where consciousness starts and stops, I think is an arrogant thing to do, without really thinking the whole thing through and having some, as you say, some real solid definitions. I agree we need solid definitions, but what I'm not sure about is that we actually have them.
I guess that's a fair point, that we may not fully understand consciousness ourselves. I think, though, that once again I'm going to appeal to the most common usages of these terms, and I would even grant that yes, dogs are conscious, by the most common usages of it, because dogs can become unconscious. To the best of my knowledge, most of the vertebrate world can become unconscious, even some invertebrates. I know that cephalopods and squids and octopuses are very intelligent and can be rendered unconscious through a variety of ways.
I tend to think that aside from the distinguishment of unconsciousness, secondly, anything that can communicate and does so actively with life of the same type or other types demonstrates a form of consciousness.
Okay. So, it's so outside of what I normally have to think in. The constraints of this are very different from my normal arguments.
I'm sorry.
So,
I know I'm frustrating.
You'll have to bear with me for a bit here, but the primary argument that the universe itself is conscious comes from the structure of the universe being similar, if not indistinguishable, really, from the structure of a brain. Not necessarily a human brain, but a brain in general. Now, this is why I thought that we should be certainly distinguishing what is consciousness, because there are many, many forms of brains out there. Earthworms have brains. I think it's more of a basal ganglion, but there are primitive brains of some sort. And I would argue that there's degrees of consciousness, but then there's also degrees of will. And I think that will is the part that implies metacognition, the ability to want something or to have plans for the future. And that's where I see consciousness certainly making a leap into self-awareness and the higher level consciousness of the complexity that would come in a squid or a human brain or a dolphin
to plan
right,
for the future.
Yes.
Okay.
So, conscious and willful creator, even if we can say that the structure of the universe is similar to a very complex brain, we, as human scientists, don't base our understanding of self-awareness or consciousness in any way from the structure of a brain. We can actually look at many things that are very similar in structure to a brain. Even the root system of a tree is very similar in many ways. It also develops in a very similar manner. But that doesn't mean that we look at that and say this tree must be conscious. What we do is we look for behavior and say this is behaving in a way that indicates that it is conscious and it indicates that it is willful. So I can certainly say that the structure of the universe may be even identical to the structure of a brain of some sort. But to make the leap from structure to function is a pretty significant leap. And I just don't think that it is a intellectually justifiable position, or, well, not justifiable, but intellectually justified position to say that just because the universe is structured in a way similar to it is, specifically when we consider the massive amounts of what is essentially empty space in between things, that we can really say that the universe itself is conscious. And to go beyond that, if we can't even say that the universe is conscious, I think that any assumptions that something outside of the universe that is conscious or that is a conscious and willful creator is most certainly an unjustified conclusion. If we can't even know enough about the universe in which we actually live and can observe to make that kind of a conclusion, we certainly cannot make that kind of a conclusion to something that cannot be observed and that by definition exists outside of our universe. So we're killing two birds with one stone on that argument. Okay. And that's really all that I have to say here. Is I think that the onus is on you to make the case that the universe itself is indeed, or more probably than not, conscious and willful. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'm going to first of all throw in everything that I said last show as part of that effort. And let me just finish a few notes here. Okay, so you're sure you're done?
I was thinking about throwing in a couple ad hominems there. By the way, audience, Joey kind of smells.
Before you finish.
Right. You're a poopy head as well. Oh. And with that, I'm done. Okay.
I hate you. Okay. All right. Let's see. Let me see if I can put my basal ganglion to this here. All right. So you started by saying that you were very emphatic about this, that if something plans for the future, it demonstrates that it has consciousness in the way that you were defining it. You were emphatic about that. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but do not ants plan for the future?
I can't say that we have evidence to believe that that is true.
Of course they do. They spend days and days building their colonies, bringing food into their colonies to prepare for good weather and bad weather. They feed their queens so that the babies can breed, etc. They demonstrate.
Well, but I think that you're projecting quite a bit there to say that they do this so that the queen can do this. No, they do this because that is what their instinct drives them to do. I'm going to give an example of a wasp. There is, I forget the species name, but there's a species of wasp. It's a predatory insect that.
It's about the fifth time you've told this story. Go ahead.
I think I have. Yeah, when it breeds, it digs a burrow. It catches a caterpillar, stings it to paralyze it, but it doesn't kill it. Then it brings the caterpillar to within a few or about an inch away from the hole that it dug, climbs into the hole, checks it to make sure that it's empty, climbs back out, puts the caterpillar into it, lays an egg on the caterpillar, and seals it off. That way, caterpillar doesn't rot. Egg has something to eat. It all works out. However, that really looks like it's planning for the future.
Sure.
But if you take that caterpillar and you move it an inch further away, the wasp repeats the process indefinitely. It will do that as many times as you move that caterpillar an inch away. And that shows that it's working on instinct and not actually planning for the future. If this wasp was conscious and aware of what it was doing,
it shows definitively that it's not planning for the future. There's no possibility that the wasp is, that there are some things that it is too dumb to understand. But I mean, I get instinct. I totally get that. That there are things that these ants are doing by instinct, but there are also things that we do by instinct. We have sex because it feels good, not because. Well, I mean, I certainly wanted to have a kid, but many human beings, they go out and they have sex because it feels good, not because they want to have babies. But that is instinctively instilled in them. They're not going. That they are not. Many human beings are not planning to have a family, but they do so instinctively because it is placed in them to do so. There are many things that we do by instinct.
I'd certainly disagree with that, actually. I think that to say something is instinctive implies, at least, that it happens without thought. And to make the argument that we have sex instinctively is almost a defense of rape. That it's an instinctive drive for me to want to have sex, and therefore I can't control myself if I see an attractive woman, and that's simply not true.
No, I'm not going to defend rape, but I am going to say that there was a day and time in which rape was the norm amongst the human species, for a man to take hold of the woman that he wanted and just have her.
That's certainly true, but that doesn't mean
we were conscious and willful during that day.
We can certainly agree on that. Were we as enlightened as we are now? No, not necessarily. But
we're not talking about enlightenment,
right? But that doesn't mean that we were purely acting on instinct. It just means that our thought processes were different.
Okay, let's move on because we're running out of time.
Okay.
Okay. My next question for you is that aside, that was just one thought, and you jumped all over it and got really petty about it. My next thought was, I'm just teasing you, does the hand plan for the future? Does my hand plan for the future?
No.
Okay, does my foot or my ear or my nose?
No.
Is there any part of me that plans for the future?
Your brain does.
My brain and my brain only. Right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And yet, you are arguing that because we cannot see consciousness and will demonstrated in the majority of the universe, that therefore we can't conclude that it has a consciousness. And last week I spent a long time arguing, making my argument, and at the end of the argument, I pointed out that if only the Earth could be shown to have a consciousness of its own, as I defined it, that we could then conclude that the universe is conscious and willful. Just as the hand does not have a will of its own, nor does Saturn, nor does Jupiter, nor does the Milky Way galaxy. But yet the Earth certainly does, observably so. So if all the, I'm not saying that the Earth is the universe's brain, but I'm saying that is a force within this universe that we can see has a collective consciousness, just as my brain has a collective consciousness, and yet my hand doesn't.
I think that you're making a pretty big distinction there, and we talked about this a bit, but it was at the end of the last show, in saying that the Earth itself has a will because there is a large collection of things that have wills on it. I don't think it is a fair leap. I mean, we were talking about cultural consciousness in that respect, and the fact that humans do have sort of a
Okay. But you're
broad
backtracking
scale.
a little bit because last week or the week before last, you agreed that is certainly consciousness, the consciousness of the people, the consciousness of a culture, that these smaller things interacting to produce a final decision, whether it is the will of one single part in that. It demonstrates a consciousness, and I understand that you had not been given opportunity to really expound on that, but you didn't take the time to do that this show. I want to. We really need to keep talking about this. This is a great discussion. I'm really enjoying this. We're running out of time on this show. If you don't agree with that, then I want you to spend some time telling me how you view that. Can we do that next week?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right. So let me just go on with some of the thoughts that I had as you were speaking. We'll move on from there for a moment. You made an argument about how much space there was in the universe, and that it was more space than anything else. And I'm shocked that you made that argument, because the same is exactly true of the human body. It is more space than it is matter. True?
We're talking about the atomic scale or subatomic scale?
All you have to do is look at the atomic scale. We are made of atoms.
That's true, but the atoms that we have are close enough, or I should say the subatomic particles even are close enough to one another to interact with one another. And that's the most important. Regardless of whether we're empty space or not, there is no...
They're close enough to interact with each other, but if you look at them proportionately to, if you take an atom and you blow it up the size of Saturn, how far is it away from the atom that it's next to?
I don't know
a long way.
Answer to that, because
I don't know the answer too, but it's a long way.
But you're right. There is quite a bit of empty space, but that's, I think, betraying. I shouldn't say betraying. It's using the difference in scale in a way that I don't feel is fully justified, because there are forces that have reach. Gravity is one such force with reach. There's weak and strong nuclear forces, and there's the magnetic force. I think those are the four forces that truly exist in the universe as we know it. And those all have a range in which they are detectably present.
Sure.
And I think that we could certainly make the argument that everything within our solar system is connected to one another. But there is I forget the name of the belt or the field on the outskirts of our solar system that I believe the Voyager spacecraft just traveled past, meaning that it is the first man-made object to ever leave what they call our solar system, and it no longer has any detectable interaction with the sun, the gravity of the sun,
right,
or any of the items within the universe. And that means, for all intents and purposes, our solar system is isolated. There is no interaction between our solar system and other solar systems, at least that we know of. It's possible.
I reject the notion that just because we cannot detect interaction and connectedness between this solar system and any other solar system does not mean it is not there. And
but I think that you're begging the question there in saying just that it doesn't mean that it's not there. I'm not saying that it's not there. I'm saying as far as we're aware, it's not there. There's no interaction of that. And again, the scientific epistemology is to begin with a null hypothesis. I really think that the approach is the significant difference between what you and I are saying here. Overall, your argument comes from the perspective that it's possible that this is the case, and it's kind of a cool story. So I like that idea. and hey, that's what theists do. So I'll grant you it's a fun thought experiment, but realistically,
I am suggesting, as any scientist would agree, that the tools that we have today to detect connections between two solar systems are primitive at best. The fact that we can look out into the universe and see these solar systems is a miracle of modern science. To suggest that because we can't detect forces that exist between them means that we must conclude that it's most likely that those forces are not there is a conclusion that a high school scientist might make, but it's not a conclusion that your leading edge scientists would make. I don't believe that. I would need to have one of them say
Again,
that to my
I'm not
face.
saying that there's a conclusion. I'm saying it's a null hypothesis. And you're right to some extent that there is a degree of interaction. Saying
Certainly.
that we can look out and see other solar systems means that we are seeing them, that there is communication, there is light, there are photons coming to us.
And that is one perceivable way in which it's connected. It is. I think it would be foolish to even go null, to suggest to take the concept that there are connections, imperceivable connections between our solar systems and go null on that. I think is foolish.
So what are the connections between our solar system and other solar systems?
I just said imperceivable.
Okay. I don't remember the origin of the quote, but I'm going to paraphrase here. Is the funny thing about the imperceivable and the non-existent is that they are so damn hard to tell apart.
Sure, but so you're suggesting that that since we're going to take the null, that it is better to take the position that we are on the verge of understanding all connections between our solar systems.
Well, it's better to take the position that if there is communication between solar systems, we are not yet capable of detecting it, and we may someday do that. But until that comes about,
by the way, those who take the null position, the scientists out there who take the null position in a very strict sense, are the ones who make no progress. It is the scientists who hypothesize and test who actually move us forward. The null position is not a forward moving position. It is the dreamers who look out and they see a curve on the horizon and they suggest, well, everybody believes that the Earth is flat, but I see a curve. Maybe it's the lens of my eye, but the Earth might be round. Let me see if I can find.
Once again, I've got to say that you're making my point here for me and saying it's the dreamers. It's in a way it's wishful thinking, and it's possible that you're right. But until we have solid, compelling evidence to say that is the case, we need to start from the null, that it's not the case as far as we know. That's what the null hypothesis means, is as far as I'm aware, that's not true. It doesn't mean that it's not true, and it's not those who take the null position that are stopping scientific progress. In fact, the null position is the very foundation of scientific progress. What we do is create then hypotheses that would reject the null. We test ideas and say, hey, we think that this is probably not true. And if I try this,
all right,
it might work, and that would say that it is true, so I can finally reject that null hypothesis.
Don't misunderstand me. I'm not suggesting that taking a null position isn't useful and honest. What I am suggesting is that the null position has its place in science and in thought, and it is not always the correct or honest thing to do to take the null position. Both of us started this conversation to the best of our ability in a null position, and we built off of that using what we both believed we could observe, and we got as far as we could, and there are some things that I am reaching for. I admit that. I'm not saying that I can prove some of these things, but I'm saying that for example, just going back to the connections between solar systems, if we begin with the idea of the Big Bang, for example, which many scientists accept, and watch in our imaginations these elements of the Big Bang spreading apart, they once had a connection. And to suggest that these connections were like a rubber band that just one day snapped, I don't think that I don't think it works that way. I think that they go from the measurable to the immeasurable. But we're out of time. Let's spend some more time next week talking about this.
Way
I'd
to
like
steal the last word on me there, Joey.
Huh? You did it to me. You do it to me all the time.
I know I do.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying steal it from me, because the last word is mine for the taking.
Oh, I hate this show. Okay, I am Joey Livingston, and this is Greg Brahe, and we hope that you've enjoyed this conversation. We'll continue it again next week, and I'm excited to learn about Greg's argument against the consciousness of this earth, and how we shouldn't dream. Until then, we both love you, and we'll see you next week.